You are listening to Move Forward with Matt Campisi. Move Forward is an interesting mix of motivational, political, and comedic discussions designed to empower, inspire, and entertain. Host Matt Campisi is a political candidate and social advocate. Episodes feature special guests and occasional artistic performances. And now here is your host, Matt Campisi.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Season 3 of Move Forward with Matthew Campisi. Thank you so much for listening to this podcast. I really appreciate my loyal listeners. And if you're new, it's your first time listening to the podcast, welcome. This is kicking off Season 3, totally new season of the podcast. We got a lot of interesting topics to discuss this season. We've got 7 episodes planned, and this is the start. This is episode number 1 of season 3. And in today's episode, I'm going to be talking about something that doesn't affect everybody. In fact, I think this affects the minority of people, but I think for the people that this does affect, I think they could really relate to this, and I think they could have some real strong opinions about this topic and how it really feels to be living with this situation. And it might seem, like many of my topics, it might seem very trivial if you haven't given it much thought, but I think that's the whole purpose of this podcast, to kind of shed some light on this and to kind of give some real perspective from somebody who's dealing with this, what it's really like to be dealing with something like this. And I know a lot of people, they think it's a blessing. And that's what's one of the more frustrating things. I guess in some ways it could be good, but let me share some of the negative aspects of this as I continue on this topic. So make up your own mind. Maybe you'll disagree with me, maybe you won't. What I'm talking about is looking much younger than your actual age. So I look much younger than my actual age, so much so that people don't believe me when I tell them my age. And in fact, even, emphatically telling them, no, I'm this age, they don't believe it because their eyes see something completely different. Their eyes see somebody that looks so much younger. And why would that be a problem, you might ask? Well, that's what I'm going to discuss in today's podcast. I look much younger than my actual age. So you're probably asking yourself, well, what's the problem with that? A lot of people, especially women, want to appear much younger than their actual age. Well, let's think about that for a second. Let's think about, what is it like? How does society treat people who are younger than them? People who are, in their 20s, let's say. And that's just it. Let me be clear on this. I'm 48 years old, and you're probably looking at me, you're looking at the screen saying, "Whoa, you do not look 48 years old, dude. You look like you're in your 20s, maybe 30, the tops, but you definitely don't look like you're 48 years old. You definitely don't look like you're almost 50." So yeah, so we've established that. I don't need to work too hard to prove to you guys that I'm not talking out my ass here, that this is a very real issue that I have. I look, 20 years, 20 plus years younger than my actual age. And why would that be a problem? Certainly you could see some positive, advantageous things about that. I could probably connect easier with younger women if that were my proclivity. They're not going to think I'm 48. They're going to think I'm, 28 or even younger. So I can, more easily fraternize with younger women, which could be advantageous if that were, like I said, if that were my proclivity. What else? Maybe just generally looking Looking young means you're healthy, I guess, is the perception. Maybe that you're looking better. You're not looking aged. You're not looking like you're on death's door. So, that's a positive thing, looking younger. Yeah. So those are like, what immediately comes to mind. A lot of people think, but what about some of the negative things when you look younger? Well, when we're dealing with people who are younger than us, we tend to treat them with a little bit less respect. We tend to, what do we ascribe to younger people? Well, younger people, we ascribe less maturity. We ascribe less experience, less education, pretty much less everything. They haven't been around on the planet for as long as the older folks have. And we a little bit look down on people that are younger than us, little young whippersnappers. So you can imagine how frustrating that would be for a man who's lived, quite a long time, lived his life, almost half a century old. And you can imagine that that person would be very frustrated when, they are socially, they're dealing with people who are younger than them. Some cases, a lot younger than them, many, many decades younger than them, treating them with less respect. Employers in the workplace, when they think you're young, they think you're less experienced, less capable, less competent. And that's how they're going to treat you when you appear much younger. It's hard to be a leader when you are much younger. It's hard to, because you're not projecting, the experience, the wise, experienced appearance that people sometimes depend on for their leaders. I mean, think about the president. The president is an aged man, gray hair. This is somebody that has been around, has a lot of experience under his belt, and this is somebody we can trust to lead our country. But if you got a youthful person in there, it's like, ooh, I don't know if this guy is experienced enough to handle the job. So you can definitely imagine, how frustrating that could be when you appear, a lot younger than your actual age. I've talked about this on the internet, around the internet, and I've I've seen some comments. One comment that particularly enraged me was somebody that was, emphatically stating that it's not possible. Nobody looks that much younger than their actual age. At most, maybe, 3, 5, 4, 5 years their age, but it's not a big thing. This is somebody that's completely clueless. Like I said, I am regularly, like almost on a daily basis. I won't say daily basis because there are days that go by, I guess where it doesn't happen, but it's weekly that I'm confused for somebody much, 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 much younger. What's an example of somebody famous? Well, an example would be like Gary Coleman. Gary Coleman was a man much, much older, an adult, treated like a child for much of his life. And I know that drove him crazy. I know it did. I've read, articles about him, watched interviews with him. I know it's driven him crazy because here is a man, a grown man, treated like a child for most of his life. And people literally don't believe the person they're talking to is their actual age. They just their eyes deceive them. So it's a very frustrating thing. Interested to hear your comments, your thoughts about this. Do you think this is a problem? Do you think I'm just over exaggerating? Do you think I'm making a mountain out of a molehill? Or what do you think? Or have you experienced this? Do you look considerably younger than your age? If so, I encourage you to go to my website. It's matthewcampisi.com. That's MatthewCampisi.com. Go to the contact link and share your feedback with me. All, positive, topic related, non abusive emails, I will definitely read and respond to if I can. And we can discuss it. We can talk about it, about the issue of looking much younger than your age. How does it affect you in the workplace? When people look at you and they don't see you as a leader, they don't see you as somebody competent, they see you as a young kid, not with the experience behind them that you actually have, not with the education behind you that you actually have, just somebody that's not competent because you just look that much younger. In dating, woman, it could actually hurt you in some ways in dating if a woman, prefers older men, she sees you younger than you actually are. You have to whip out your driver's license and show her your age to prove that you're actually the age that you are. That sort of thing. I'm not talking about minor inconveniences. Not talking about getting carded at bars and supermarkets when you're buying alcohol. Obviously, that's annoying when that kind of stuff happens. But we can all live with that kind of stuff. I'm talking about a little more substantive type of things, like how it really affects you in your work, in your relationships with people, and how people treat people that they think are much younger than them or young. I remember one time I was checking into a hotel in Virginia, and I remember I actually had an argument with the woman, because she didn't even think you had to be 21 to check into the hotel. I guess that was her hotel policy. She was the owner, and this was an older woman, much older. And I got into an argument with her because she didn't believe that I was even 21. And at the time, I was in my 30s, and I'm sitting here arguing with the woman. I just wanted to make her feel like a fucking idiot for the way she was treating me. And that's why I didn't immediately just whip out my driver's license. I wanted to really lay into this woman because how fucking disrespectful of her to, treat me this way, treating me like I'm a kid. And I said to her, I don't remember exactly word for word what I said, but something to the effect of, I'm a grown adult. I'm a fucking grown adult. I'm not a kid. And she was so taken aback by that. And when she saw my driver's license, she just shut the fuck up, and that was the end of the conversation. She had nothing left to say after that. But this is what it's like when you have to constantly prove your age to people when you appear much younger. Those are the annoyances. Those are the things that, drive us mad, drive us crazy. But like I said, it becomes a real problem when you're talking about competency and you're talking about, a job interview, for example. You go to that job interview, and what is the perception that the interviewer has about you when you come in there looking like a kid? You know, what is the perception that your coworkers have of you when you are, "Hi, I'm Matt, and I'm the new worker here at the workplace." Or if you're a supervisor and you're meeting your team for the first time, say, "Hi guys, how's everybody doing?" And your team, is looking at you thinking, "Who's this kid?" A kid is going to supervise us. I'm not a kid. I'm actually, such and such years old, and I have 30 years of experience in my field. So you can imagine how it feels. And then with me in particular, when you top it off with, I'm also short statured, which really makes things even worse. It would be bad if I looked, 20 something years old and I was, 6 foot tall. But when you combine the fact that, I'm 5'6" and I look like I'm 21, 22 years old, 23 years old, it really makes things a lot harder for me. So I would ask people, if you're listening to this podcast, to think about that, to think about, um, what that might be like for a person, whether they're a male or a female, um, to be treated like they're not their own fucking age, and to be treated like they're a kid by kids, by people who are younger than them. I mean, I've had kids that are literally 18, 19 years old believe that I'm their peer. And you can imagine what that would feel like. Think for a second, if you were in those shoes and you were being talked to by an 18-year-old and you're 48 years old, you're old enough to be their dad, well, old enough to be their dad, and they're talking like you're one of them, like you're their age. You can imagine the humiliation. You can imagine the anger. You can imagine, how that makes you feel. And it's not good, folks, especially when you're a male. I have heard females complain about this as well. I know this affects females as well, but you can imagine how that makes a grown man feel when he is treated that way, when he's treated like he is a child, when he's treated like he's much, much, much younger than he actually is. I've paid my dues. I've lived on this earth for almost half a century, and I've I fathered children. I've worked numerous jobs. I've attained education. I've hurt, I've loved, and I've divorced, and I've this, and I've that. I've lived my life. I have lived a life. I am not fresh out of high school. I'm not 19. I'm not 20. I'm a grown fucking man. And it's a shame that my exterior appearance um, puts out a different message to the world. Even now, as you're watching this, you probably are questioning my age. You're probably saying, oh, he's probably this age. But no, spoiler alert, I'm going to tell you I'm 48 years old. I'm almost 50 years old. I'm not in my 20s. And it's a very fucking frustrating thing. It really pisses me off. Um, you know, and I don't know if we can ascribe blame, when you look how you look, I get that. But I'm just trying to spread awareness about this that, uh, you don't know. You don't know who you're dealing with. You can't judge a book by its cover. That saying is really, really true. When you look at me and you assume that I'm in my 20s, you could be completely wrong. And yeah, it's a very, very frustrating thing for me in my life. I know it's caused me a lot of stress, pissed me off, really pissed me off, looking, so much younger. Maybe I'll appreciate it. Maybe I'll appreciate it when I'm in my 70s if I make it to that age. Because I guess when I'm in my 70s, I'll probably look like I'm in my 40s or 50s. So maybe I'll appreciate it then, being a senior citizen and just looking like I'm just now approaching middle age. Uh, I don't know. I don't know, guys. I don't know. I don't have all the answers when it comes to this issue, but I appreciate you listening to me rant about it, and I definitely would love to hear what you have to say about it. If you have something interesting to add, a unique perspective on looking so much younger than your age, I'd love to hear it. If you're dealing with this, I'd love to hear your comments on it. Go to my website, MatthewCampisi.com. Tell me what you think. Am I overreacting? Am I making a mountain out of a molehill? Is there bigger problems in life that I should be worried about than looking younger? I don't know, man. Some of the situations I've been in, workplace issues where my team doesn't respect me. They think I'm a inexperienced kid. Like I said, those kind of social little hiccups, like I told you about in my example at the hotel, things like that. Women who don't believe my age. It's a lot. It's a lot to handle. And I think you have to really experience this. It has to be lived in order to fully appreciate the negative sides of looking, much younger than your age. So yeah, I appreciate you guys listening to this podcast, and I wish you all well, and Happy New Year.